There were many signs of newness about the 1973 University of Nebraska Cornhusker football team, but none of the newness prevented the Cornhuskers from demonstrating a great many similarities with the great Nebraska teams of the Bob Devaney era. Devaney had retired after the 1972 season to devote all his time to the athletic directorship. And moving into the Husker coaching spotlight was a 35-year-old veteran of the Devaney staff, Tom Osborne. Gone, too, were such football greats as Heisman Trophy winner Johnny Rodgers, Outland Lombardi winner Rich Glover, All-America Willie Harper, and 7 other Cornhuskers who were among the top draft choices of professional football. But Coach Tom Osborne and his 1973 Nebraska Cornhuskers hardly missed a step as they put together a powerhouse team that challenged for Big 8 and national honors throughout the season. Tom Osborne became only the 3rd Nebraska coach in history to win as many as 8 games in his first season. W.C. Cole did it in 1907, as did Bob Devaney in 1962. No other coach in Nebraska history ever took his first team to a major bowl game. It all started with the very first game, as the Huskers gained sweet revenge over a fine UCLA team. 1 year earlier, UCLA had snapped Nebraska's 32-game victory string. But in 1973, UCLA provided the springboard for a great coaching debut for Tom Osborne and an outstanding season for the new Cornhuskers. Building on that 40-13 route, engineered by alternate quarterback Steve Ruddy, who took over for injured Dave Humm, and witnessed by millions on national TV, the Huskers battled to an 8-2-1 record, gained a major bowl berth for the 4th year in a row when the Cotton Bowl beckoned in November, traversed their way through the toughest football conference in America to finish in a tie for 2nd place after being in the title race until the final game. So tough was the Big 8 race that it tended to overshadow the excitement of the non-conference action. But there was plenty of that, to say the least. Like in the UCLA game, when Tony Davis launched his 1,000-yard rushing year with a great run against the Bruins. Or Randy Borg's 77-yard punt return for a touchdown. Non-conference football action continued to be spectacular. Dave Humm returned to action against the Wolfpack, and his passing got the Huskers rolling. And in the 4th quarter, they broke open the tight contest. It took a miracle finish for Nebraska to pull out a win over Wisconsin and remain undefeated. Threatened with defeat by the Badgers, the Huskers drove 80 yards to score on a Humm to Anderson pass. Then, more big plays as Humm passed and Rich Baugh ran for 40 yards. And that set up a Tony Davis touchdown run. The Huskers pulled out the hair-raising 20-16 win over Wisconsin with 2 80-yard touchdown marches in the final 6 minutes. Frosty Anderson had his biggest day in Minnesota, catching 3 touchdown passes. He tied the Nebraska record held by Johnny Rodgers and Clarence Swanson. Frosty helped the Huskers romp to a 48-7 victory over the Golden Gophers. Nebraska's 1973 pass defense led the Big 8 and the nation with an unbelievable 39.9-yard average yield per game. That's the best pass defense yardage mark since 1960, and a mark bettered by only 4 teams in the last 25 years. And the Huskers held the opposition to a completion percentage of a mere 28%, the best national mark since 1947, and topped by one other school since 1946. Topping all is the fact that Nebraska allowed only 1 touchdown pass to be completed against the Huskers all season. The Cornhuskers could point with pride to 2 consensus All-America players, co-captains Darrell White, a fine 3-year offensive tackle star, and John Dutton, the giant defensive tackle who made life miserable for the opposition. Big 8 honors were conferred on Dutton and White, along with ace defensive end Steve Manstead and touchdown snaring split end Frosty Anderson. Perhaps even more impressive was the fact that Nebraska led the Big 8 with selections to the all-conference academic team. Frosty Anderson, Steve Manstead, Dan Anderson, Tom Rood, Maury Damkroger, and Rich Baugh, all standouts in the classroom as well as on the football field. Another Nebraska trademark, fantastic support from the Cornhusker fans, was a big feature in the 1973 season's success. The Huskers played at home before 6 sellout crowds that averaged over 76,000. This continued to build upon Nebraska's record of 68 consecutive sellouts dating back to 1962, a record which leads the nation by a wide margin. And so popular were the high-ranking Cornhuskers across the nation that they played to sellout crowds every place they appeared in 1973. Yes, indeed. The 1973 football season was another one of outstanding achievement for the Cotton Bowl-bound University of Nebraska Cornhuskers and for new coach Tom Osborne. But the real story of 1973 in the Midlands was the improvement and balance of the Big 8 Conference. In 1973, Big 8 football games were something special. Ranked number 2 in the nation and undefeated in 4 games, the Cornhuskers headed into the tough Big 8 conference race with high hopes and guarded optimism. The Huskers were a fine team, but the Big 8 had many fine teams. The first test came at Columbia, Missouri, where the Huskers met the Tigers, also undefeated after 4 games, in one of the great games of the 1973 college season before a record crowd of over 63,000 fans. There were heroics by both teams, and the game went to the final seconds before the issue was settled. Nebraska gallantly went for 2 points with 1 minute left to play. The Tigers stopped the Huskers to take a 13-12 decision. Nebraska thoroughly outclassed the Tigers in yardage, amassing over 400 yards. But Missouri guarded its goal line well and blunted several scoring threats during the old-fashioned slugfest that saw Nebraska get an early jump when Randy Borg intercepted a John Cherry pass in the first quarter. High-back Tony Davis tore 18 yards, and it looked like the Huskers were TD bound. But the Tiger defense stiffened. Rich Sanger came in to kick a 42-yard field goal to put Nebraska on top 3-0, with 6:23 left in the opening period. Dave Hums passed to tight end Brent Longwell, set up another Sanger field goal, and a 6-0 lead. Nebraska's defense, meanwhile, was playing in superb fashion. Tackle John Dutton constantly kept pressure on the Tiger quarterback Cherry. Missouri fought back with 2 field goals by Greg Hill in the second quarter, and it was a 6-6 deadlock at halftime. In the third quarter, the Cornhuskers again went on the move. Hum hit split end Dave Shamblin, who took over for Frosty Anderson after he was injured in the first period, for 31 yards. Hum also fired a 29-yarder to Rich Baugh, and it looked again as though the Nebraskans could break the stalemate. Still, the Husker defense battled furiously and completely shut off the Tiger offense. Tiger Tommy Riemann was hauled down for a loss by Steve Manstead and Mark Heidorf. It was still tied in the fourth quarter when Hum hit Shamblin for 25 yards. But again, the Huskers failed to score. Then came the big break of the skin-tight game. Missouri was forced to punt, and Husker Randy Borg bobbled the ball, tried to retrieve it, and then lost it to the Tigers at the NU4. 2 plays later, Tom Mulkey pounded over for a TD, and Hill kicked the point to give the Tigers a 13-6 lead with only 2:03 left in the game. As they've always done, the Cornhuskers roared back with amazing quickness. Hum rifled a 31-yard pass to Baugh, who wound up in the Tiger 41. Back came Hum, this time firing a 20-yarder to sophomore tight end Larry Mashinsky, who makes a sensational catch. Finally, capping a great last-ditch drive, Hum spots Baugh over the middle and delivers a 22-yard touchdown pass to get the Huskers a chance for victory with 1 minute left to play. Nebraska went for 2 points and a victory over a cinch tie. Hum's pass was tipped, then intercepted by Tony Gillick to dice the Husker hopes for a national title and an undefeated season. Now, with a 4-1 record and an 0-1 start in Big 8 play, the Cornhuskers had to bounce back against a fine Kansas team. No easy task, to be sure. 2 teams with identical 4-1 records, both boasting outstanding passers and potent offenses. That was the matchup as Nebraska, led by David Hum, and Kansas, led by David James, squared off in Lincoln before a homecoming crowd of 76,498 fans. Kansas had beaten Kansas State to take an early Big 8 lead, while Nebraska had lost a heartbreaker to Missouri and desperately needed a win to get back in contention. It was billed as a great aerial duel between Hum and James, but neither team got much help from its passing game during the grueling defensive struggle. Nebraska's black shirts put the clamps on James, holding him to a mere 10 completions and only 90 yards. And Nebraska coach Tom Osborne strategically shifted the Husker offense to the infantry to counter the KU pass defense that led the nation in interceptions. Typical of Nebraska's defense that was to sparkle all day was the play of tackle and co-captain John Dutton, throwing James for an 8-yard loss. Then Nebraska drove 80 yards, all on the ground, for a touchdown. Alternate fullback Ralph Fowle got 11 yards. Rich Baugh sprinted 14 yards. And Tony Davis ripped the middle for a touchdown with 2:03 left in the first quarter. With a 7-0 lead, Nebraska stuck to the ground. Davis got a 10-yarder in the second quarter. Taking to the air in the third quarter, Dave Hum hit tight end Brent Longwell for 18 yards. Delvin Williams got KU a 9-7 lead. But the point-after-touchdown kick was blocked by Ardell Johnson, a play that was to save the day for the Huskers. Linebacker Bob Nelson got the Huskers back in business with an interception and returned to the Kansas 16. Then Rich Sanger kicked a 28-yard field goal for a 10-9 lead with 12:28 left in the game. The rest was up to Nebraska's black shirts, and they responded with a tremendous performance. John Bell and John Dutton teamed to toss James for a 3-yard loss. Linebacker Bob Schmidt on successive plays broke up passes by James as ace Jayhawk receiver Bruce Adams was shut out for the day. Finally, Steve Manstead threw Williams for a loss to help preserve the hard-won 10-9 decision, and Nebraska had an important victory over an outstanding Kansas team to get back in the Big 8 race. Oklahoma State traditionally provides the Huskers with some of the toughest competition of the season, and 1973 was no exception. Nebraska headed to Stillwater with a 5-1 record and a 1-1 mark in Big 8 action. It turned out to be one of the most hard-fought contests of the Big 8 season, winding up in dramatic fashion a 17-17 tie. Nebraska's sophomore running back Tony Davis came within one carry of a record. He toted the ball 34 times, just once less than Jeff Kinney had against Oklahoma back in 1969. Sophomore I-back John O'Leary, who got a starting shot but suffered a first-quarter injury, ripped off 14 yards on the first play. The league-leading Cowboy defense held and forced a Rich Sanger field goal from the 30, and Nebraska went ahead 3-0. Oklahoma State tied it with a 51-yard field goal midway through the first quarter, and then the Huskers had bad luck. With Tony Davis running an under pattern, he had to dodge an official, and star Cowboy linebacker Cleveland Van stepped in to intercept Dave Hum's pass and turn it into a 23-yard touchdown play. Trailing 10-3, the Huskers roared back to move 88 yards in 7 plays to tie the score. Hum hit Dave Shamblin with a 23-yard pass. Then followed a 16-yard run by Maury Damkroger. A 40-yard pass to Shamblin. 2 plays later, Davis plunged for the touchdown. Defense took the spotlight during the rest of the game, as in the second quarter when Husker pressure forced a hurried Brent Blackman pitch to Thompson, and Ron Pruitt recovers a loose ball. In the third quarter, with Nebraska trailing 17-10, Blackman was forced to fumble by black shirt pressure. Tom Rood recovered to set the stage for the tying touchdown drive, capped by Dave Hum's quarterback sneak. Moving from the OSU 46 with 6 minutes left, Davis carried once, then caught a 14-yard pass from Hum. The hard-running Husker sophomore then carried 8 straight times, On fourth down from the 6-inch line, Davis tried again and was thrown back by the Cowboys' defense. A great option quarterback, Blackman almost got the Cowboys into field goal position and a shot for victory with a 47-yard sideline dash. But once again, the Nebraska defense saved the day when Steve Manstead stormed in to throw Blackman for a 6-yard loss. That ended the action, and a 17-17 tie went into the record books. Neither team was in a celebrating mood, but both had given a great effort in a classic Big 8 struggle. It was showdown time once again for the Nebraska Cornhuskers, this time against the always potent Colorado Buffaloes. Colorado had beaten Missouri, the only team to beat Nebraska. Both the Huskers and the Buffs needed a victory to keep alive any hope for the Big 8 title and a major bowl bid. Nebraska had lost only once to Colorado since 1961, and that was in Lincoln in 1967. Memorial Stadium in Lincoln, as usual, was sold out. More than 76,000 fans jammed in for this colorful gridiron rivalry. The 66th consecutive Nebraska sellout, a record that leads in the nation in the fan support department. A keyed-up Cornhusker team paid no attention to the 45-degree temperature. After the opening kickoff, wingback Rich Baugh got 7 yards on a right-end reverse. 5 plays later, the Huskers went for the bomb. Quarterback Dave Humm rifling a 44-yard pass to split-end Dave Shamblin, who battled to the Colorado 9-yard line. On the very next play, Humm passes to tight end Brent Longwell, and the Huskers have a touchdown and a 7-0 lead after Rich Sanger's extra point kick. Later in the first quarter, a Colorado fumble gives Nebraska a big break, and the Huskers strike quickly. Tony Davis slashes through a big hole for a 9-yard touchdown, and Sanger makes it 14-0. Nebraska's defense was to play a big part in the 28-16 victory that day, too. John Dutton's smashing play on Buff star Charlie Davis was one of many black shirt gems. In the second quarter, the Cornhuskers again came up with a big play. Sophomore middle guard Willie Thornton, subbing for the injured John Bell, breaks through to block a Buff punt. Just 2 plays later, Humm spots Frosty Anderson, and they teamed up for a 21-yard touchdown to celebrate Frosty's return to action after a 3-week injury layoff. Sanger's kick made it 21-3, and Husker fans breathed easier, particularly with the black shirts making life miserable for the Buffs on such plays as Steve Manstead and Ron Pruitt combining to bat down a Clyde Crutchmer pass. Forcing a Buff punt, the Huskers take off in high gear again on a 71-yard touchdown drive. The big gainer is a 25-yard Humm to Baugh strike, good to the Buff 36-yard line. Just before the half, from the 6-inch line, Tony Davis sails high over the pile to boost the Cornhuskers to a 28-3 bulge at halftime. In the third quarter, a Nebraska fumble gives Colorado the ball deep in Husker territory. And 2 plays later, Bo Matthews scores from the 5, 2-point extra point try, fails. The Big Red still has a comfortable 28-9 lead. That was it for the Buffs, as the Nebraska defense, helped by a hard charge by John Lee that throws Waddy for a 14-yard loss, put the lid on a well-deserved 28-16 victory. Iowa State had spoiled Nebraska's Big 8 title hopes in 1972 with a last-second pass that brought the Cyclones a 23-23 tie, and the Cornhuskers had waited a year to settle the score. This was probably the best losing team in the nation to visit Memorial Stadium for the final home game of the 1973 season. Iowa State had won only 2 games, but the Cyclones had lost heartbreakers to Colorado, Kansas, and Kansas State, and had led Oklahoma 17-7 before losing 34-17 the week before the Nebraska game. So Memorial Stadium was jammed with a capacity crowd of over 76,000 once again, as Nebraska sought to nail down a major bowl bid and stay in the tight Big 8 race. And the red-coated fans didn't have long to wonder about the intentions of the Cornhuskers. Early in the first quarter, Cyclone Mike Tyson was forced to fumble by Nebraska's black shirt defense, and tackle Ron Pruitt fell on the ball at the Iowa State 21. John O'Leary got 8 of the necessary yards in the short drive, and 2 plays later, Dave Humm sneaked over for the touchdown. Rich Sanger kicked the point to give Nebraska a 7-0 lead with 10-10 left in the first quarter. Once again, Nebraska stormed down the field to take advantage of cyclone jitters. Hum hit wingback Rich Baugh with a 25-yard touchdown pass with 9:19 left in the quarter. Rich Sanger kicked his 200th point as a Cornhusker, and Nebraska led 14-0. In the second quarter, Husker linebacker John Starkeybaum throws Iowa State's Buddy Hardeman for an 8-yard loss to force a punt. That got the ball for the Huskers, and in 3 plays they whistled 78 yards to score, with the big bomb coming on a 67-yard beauty from Dave Hum to Frosty Anderson. Sanger also kicked a 49-yard field goal in the second period to make it 17-0. Back came the black shirts, and John Dutton smeared the Cyclones' Hardeman on an attempted end run. Iowa State got on the board in the third quarter, thanks to some fine running by Tyson, who was subbing for the injured Mike Strawn. One of his best efforts was an 18-yard run that got the Cyclones into scoring position. Later in the third quarter, with Nebraska leading 24-7, Tyson was thrown for a loss by Husker Ron Pruitt. Nebraska reserves saw a lot of action in the fourth quarter, and a pass interception by John Starkeybaum got the Huskers rolling for a final touchdown. A big play came when Steve Runty fired a 37-yard strike to Larry Mashinsky to set up the score. And with only 24 seconds left in the game, Runty sneaked in for the touchdown. The Cornhuskers had boosted their record to 7-1-1 and into the thick of a major bowl consideration. After the game, the Huskers voted to accept a bowl bid if it came the following week. Then they set their sights on a tough windup. Both Kansas State and Oklahoma had to be played away from home, and Memorial Stadium would head into mothballs for another year. Proud of 67 straight home sellouts and an average 1973 attendance figure of 76,121 fans. With a Cotton Bowl bid waiting and still a chance for the Big 8 title, the Nebraska Cornhuskers moved to Manhattan, Kansas for a crucial contest with the Kansas State Wildcats. The Huskers had been improving each week, and the offense was gaining confidence. They wanted a Cotton Bowl bid, and they wanted to take an 8-1-1 record into the final game with Oklahoma in Shootout 3 at Norman on the Friday after Thanksgiving. Joining the Cornhuskers at Kansas State were some 15,000 red-coated Nebraskans who filled almost one-third of the Wildcat Stadium. And the Nebraskans didn't have long to wait for the Huskers to get rolling. Dave Hum hit Rich Baugh with a 17-yard pass on the opening drive, but a fumble at the K-State aide dashed early hopes. Then, with 4:50 left in the first quarter, Rich Sanger kicked a 30-yard field goal, and Nebraska never trailed en route to a 50-21 victory. Late in the quarter, Sanger punted to Isaac Jackson, who fumbled at the Wildcat 5. Dan Anderson recovered for Nebraska. On the next play, Tony Davis scored the first of 3 touchdowns as Nebraska took a 10-0 lead into the second quarter. The next time Nebraska got the ball, the Huskers went 91 yards in 6 plays, with the big play coming on a pass from wingback Rich Baugh to tight end Brent Longwell that carried to the 1. On the next play, Hum sneaked it in for the TD, and Nebraska led 17-0. When Kansas State gambled on a 4th and 3 at the NU 34, All-America tackle John Dutton roared in to throw the Wildcat quarterback for an 8-yard loss. Ralph Powell's 13-yard run set up the next Husker score. And Tony Davis scored from the 4 2 plays later as Nebraska took a 23-0 lead into the halftime. Kansas State got back in the game 23-14 in a hurry as the Wildcats took advantage of 2 Husker fumbles. But Husker safety Bob Thornton stemmed the tide by intercepting a Wildcat pass and giving Nebraska a chance to get a drive rolling. 5 plays later, John O'Leary swept the left side for another Husker tally to make it 30-14 as the third quarter ended. On one of the freak plays of the year, the Kansas State center picked up his teammate's fumble and outraced tackle John Dutton for a touchdown that got the Wildcats back within 9, 30-21. But then the Huskers put it away in no uncertain terms. They marched 74 yards following the kickoff. Davis went the final 4 for a 37-21 lead. Another 4th down stand by the NU defense got the ball back quickly, and the Huskers struck again Steve Runny's pass to Dave Shamblin in the end zone. And as the final minutes ticked off, the Huskers added the frosting on the Cotton Bowl cake as freshman quarterback Earl the Pearl Everett raced 36 yards for a touchdown with 1:55 left in the game. It had been a fun day for the Cornhuskers. A lot of scoring, a lot of reserves seeing a lot of action, and a Cotton Bowl invitation to play Texas on New Year's Day. It had been a long and difficult season, but the big week had finally arrived once again. Oklahoma was next, and the Huskers looked forward to the big one. The 1973 meeting between the two giants of the Big Eight Conference, Nebraska and Oklahoma, was billed as Shootout 3, a renewal of a great rivalry that had its zenith in 1971 in the game of the century, which Nebraska won 35-31, a contest that we call the greatest football game ever played. The Sooners rebounded in 1972 to take a 17-14 decision in Shootout 2. So Shootout 3 shaped up as another Big Eight title game on national television on the day after Thanksgiving. Oklahoma could clinch the title with a win, even though the Sooners were banned from postseason play. Well, the Huskers had to beat the Sooners and hope Oklahoma State could too the following week. But Oklahoma's masterful defensive unit erased all the alternatives and put the Sooners in the throne room with a shutout against the Cornhuskers, as 62,000 fans jammed Owen Field in Norman, Oklahoma. The 27-0 loss was the first shutout for the Cornhuskers in 58 games since the last game of the 1968 season. Nebraska's defense was magnificent also, stopping Oklahoma's potent wishbone attack time after time. But the Huskers could never consistently dent the Sooner defense. There were some bright spots, however, and perhaps the finest performance of the day was turned in by Husker punter Rich Sanger, who booted the ball 9 times for an average of 48.6 yards. 2 of his kicks went 63 and 65 yards. Nebraska I-back Tony Davis, although held to 41 yards by the Sooners, went over the 1,000-yard mark for the season, to become only the 3rd Husker ever to achieve that plateau and only the 2nd sophomore. Bobby Reynolds, 1,342 yards in 1950, is the only first-year production to outrank Davis. Nebraska tried many things to dent the Sooner defense. Davis ran from the I-back spot for 3 early in the game, but the Huskers couldn't sustain the drive. Then Oklahoma went to work against the tough Nebraska defense, led by All-America tackle John Dutton, who put the clamps on Sooner quarterback Steve Davis. But the Sooners came back with the first of 2 big plays that got them a 14-0 halftime lead. Elusive Joe Washington set up the first TD with a 34-yard run to the Husker 6. Nebraska went to the air as Dave Humm hit Rich Baugh with a 13-yard pass. But again, OU's defense stopped the drive. Then came the big play of the game, as Sooner Steve Davis kept and tore 47 yards that put the Huskers in a 14-0 hole. The second quarter was scoreless, as both defensive units battled furiously. Husker kicker Rich Sanger highlighted the action by getting off a 65-yard punt despite heavy Sooner pressure. John Bell made a big defensive play on the Sooners' Davis to stall an OU drive. And Nebraska took to the air again on a 16-yard Dave Humm to Frosty Anderson completion. But an interception killed that drive. The Cornhuskers retaliated just before the half when Tom Root intercepted a Davis pass. Third quarter action saw Tony Davis edge toward the 1,000-yard mark with a 6-yard run on a pitch play as the Huskers tried to get outside the Sooner defense. Oklahoma took a 20-0 lead, and Husker Tony Davis used his longest run of the day on a pitch and a key block from Stan Hegner to go over the 1,000-yard mark. In the fourth quarter, Husker Ardell Johnson blocked a Sooner field goal attempt, but Oklahoma capitalized on a 41-yard pass play, only the 3rd completion of the day, for a 51-yard total against the nation's #1 pass defense team. The Sooners scored again to make the final score 27-0. It was a disappointing loss, of course, for the proud Cornhuskers, but they could look back on a fine season under new coach Tom Osborne, a rebuilding job of outstanding proportion after the graduation losses of Heisman Trophy winner Johnny Rodgers, Outland Lombardi winner Rich Glover, and a host of other players who went on to the professional ranks. And with an outstanding 8-2-1 record, the 1973 Cornhuskers could look the college football world in the eye and set their sights on the Cotton Bowl and a nationally attractive match for the mighty Texas Longhorns. There were disappointments in 1973, as there always are when perfection is the goal, as it traditionally is in the University of Nebraska football program. But once again, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, who posted their 12th consecutive winning season and received their 10th bowl invitation during the same span, showed the nation that they were the champions in victory and defeat and gained pride in their accomplishments, looking forward with great optimism to the future.